Welcome everyone to a new PC build, now with a cup of tea instead of my usual can of Pepsi. This build will consist of a 5600 non-X processor paired with 32GB of 3600 CL16 RAM, a 1TB M.2 SSD and a very special Japanese edition RTX 3070 that I personally picked up in Kyoto. If you want to know more about this particular card, please look for the video link in the description with its unboxing. I must admit, I kinda thought I had made a bit of a mistake buying this GPU now with the 4060 Ti coming and destroying it, but once the card launched, I had a little giggle and felt a warm fuzzy feeling that the 30 series is just as relevant as ever. Start us off, we need to remove the components from my test bench. One rather important note here is I have already concluded all the testing using the box cooler, explaining the higher than expected temperatures during gameplay for the CPU. The reason for that was that I had not yet received this Thermalright Assassin X 120mm tower cooler. The installation process for the cooler is fairly straightforward. I'm not a massive fan of the fact that the AM4 location mounts on the bracket look a bit like an afterthought, but overall, once installed, they are sturdy and confidence inspiring, and for an inexpensive cooler, that is high praise. Unfortunately, the RGB fan is 5V and this board only has 12V RGB. But not to worry, I've got something special in mind to replace that fan with, so I'll leave the fan off for the minute. Next, I'm opening up this brand new Fangxiang S500 Pro M.2 SSD. Normally when buying new, I opt for Crucial, Kioxia or SanDisk as budget options, but this one really stood out from the crop of Chinese ones, offering ridiculous endurance that is 4 times more than the equivalent Crucial, boasting of a massive 640 terabits written, 0.9 drive writes per day for 2 years, which no home user will ever get to. Plus, every other spec being the same or slightly better, I decided to take a chance after reading reviews that seem to give it a glowing endorsement. In a normal gaming PC, this drive should last, 10 years at least. Far longer than what the PC will be relevant for in any case. Next, it will all come together inside this decent looking but non-pretentious AlphaCool case in which I pre-installed a 500GB hard drive and a 700W non-modular Colin Core PSU. One of my other videos about PSUs, I talk about this exact model if you want to know more. But suffice to say, I trust this enough that I used it to power my 4090 while doing some encoding testing, so I have no issues trusting it to power this mid-range PC with plenty of power left in reserve. And now to fix that CPU fan situation, I'll be installing this grey Noctua fan that is simply leaps and bounds better than the one that came off in the first place. True, it still doesn't have RGB, but you do get a much better fan. And finally, the star of the show, the Japanese domestic market Galax Galakuro Gaming RTX 3070. GPU that, apart from not having RGB, is a seriously solid piece of kit with a very impressive 9 to 11C edge to hotspot delta and a very welcome 0 RPM fan mode that is well thought out. I should point out that none of the benchmarks are with this GPU overclocked, but it does advertise on the box that it has a one-click OC mode with a companion Android or iOS app. I haven't bothered with any of that, just gave it a quick test in Afterburner, and for about 25 watts more you can have a stable 2 GHz on the core and plus 800 on the memory with minimal fuss. And that's it for the actual build. Time for a first start, and apart from the relative RGB sparseness, this is a ridiculously capable mid-range PC. As we head into the benchmarks, I have changed things around a bit this time, purely because I have benchmarked the RTX 3070 before and because I want to check out the performance in a bunch of games I don't usually include. But we start off as per usual with Heaven that runs at 179.3 FPS on average, putting it right in line with expectation. But this time at 1440p, not 1080 as I usually do. The reason for the bump in resolution is twofold. One, it's 2023 not 2016 and I feel a bit silly testing everything at an artificially low 1080p. And second, it is the current controversy over how much VRAM you actually need. While yes, I do agree the more is better, duh, I tend to disagree with the assessment that 8GB is simply not okay in 2023. Yes, obviously, there are games and instances where you can blow past the VRAM budget, especially since the newer consoles use more than that, but bringing the settings down just enough to stay under the 8GB VRAM limit usually costs very little, and the visual degradation is, for the moment at least, very slim. So don't go exchanging your 3070 cards for 2060 12GB, folks. VRAM means nothing without the compute to actually take advantage of it. I've now decided to permanently swap superposition with 3D Mark, as I think this can provide a bit more insight compared to the former. I was tempted to retire Heaven, but I can't bring myself to do it. Here the 3070 scored 3402 points and stayed above 30 FPS for the full duration of the speedway test, which is right in line with expectations. Rocket League unsurprisingly runs with ridiculously high frame rates that, as far as I know, only a single monitor, the Asus ROG Swift PG27AQN, can hope to take advantage of, so I think we can just move on. To Fortnite, which is a bit more demanding, but still runs a very impressive 92 FPS on average in the walnut world I usually use for benchmarking with all the fancy nanite and lumen turned on. I see this as a kind of RTX Lite, pun intended, that seems to offer visuals very close to ray tracing but without the hefty penalty, or much less of it. Call me a sellout, but for more mid-range hardware I really like Epic's implementation here. Horizon Zero Dawn at Ultra 1440p with DLSS puts on a great showing with 127 FPS on average. I know this game is not exactly next gen anymore because Horizon Forbidden West exists and it looks so much better, but until Sony gets their act together and releases that for PC, I will keep coming back to this title. Mostly because robot dinos are cool. Soon to be the previous entry in the Assassin's Creed series once Mirage launches, Valhalla has improved dramatically since its launch in 2020, making me now actually want to play it. Too bad the story is still a bit meh. More to the point though, the 86 FPS on average with FSR is plenty for this primarily single player exploration game, so no complaints here. I just wish it was capable of this kind of smooth performance at launch, made an earnest effort at a playthrough that ended in boredom. Next is Shadow of the Tomb Raider, a game which I have owned for ages, but for whatever reason only recently decided to include it in the comparison, primarily as a counter to the less updated Days Gone. So widely touted as the future when the first RTX cars launched, the RT implementation is woeful at best in this title, but the roster still holds up really well today, plus with 145 FPS on average, it is a superb gaming experience. Next is Forza 5 with extreme settings with DLSS that make this game look like a lot of fun and a good reason to buy a proper steering wheel, and with 93 FPS on average it also runs very well. There is also ample scope here to fine-tune the settings and get up to 120 or 144 FPS depending on your monitor. Next up is Control, a game that really leans into the RT-ness of it all and delivers an impressive visual feast with 82 FPS on average. I recently heard that a new Alan Wake is on the horizon, and since that game is set in the same shared universe, I am really hoping for a repeat of the dazzling sensation that is Control, probably with some sort of literary twist. And finally for today's Cyberpunk, I skipped The Witcher 3 Next Gen because it's still not really playable on max settings with RT on, unlike CD Projekt's Red other major creation, and I don't want to get upset. Back in the room, 57 FPS on average using the RT Ultra preset and DLSS is a great result in Cyberpunk, while being able to enjoy it to its maximum potential. So yes, path tracing exists, but that brings my 4090 to his knees, so better move along. That is about it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video and see you in the next one.